All right, let's talk about something that, well, fundamentally changes how you might think about the world, especially the role of things that seem, incredibly rare or unlikely. We're getting into this remarkable book that tackles just that.
Yes, exactly. The book is centered on these events the author calls Black Swans, and they have these three key characteristics, right? They're rare, definite outliers.
Okay.
They carry an extreme impact, huge consequences.
Right.
And despite being totally unpredictable before they happen, looking back, we always seem to cook up explanations, make them seem less random than they really were.
And it's not just some dry academic thing, is it? The way the book is written is, well, it's part of its punch. I saw those reviews mentioned. One compared the author's style to Stephen Colbert and Montaigne.
Right.
That tells you something, right? That mix of sharp wit and deep thinking.
Totally. It's got that edge. And another review highlighted its courage, facing down our own tendencies, our impulse to ignore the really big, unimaginable stuff.
Yeah, preparing for the truly unimaginable.
That really nails it. So our mission here is basically to unpack the core ideas from the book. We want to figure out why our usual ways of thinking, our standard tools for analysis, just completely fall apart when we're faced with the truly unexpected.
And what we can actually do about it. That's the key, though.
Exactly. What can we do to navigate a world that's shaped by these unpredictable, high-impact events?
Okay, so let's get into it. The book kicks off by making this really crucial distinction about randomness itself. It talks about two different worlds almost, mediocristan and extremistan. What's the deal there? Why does that matter so much?
Yeah, this is foundational, absolutely foundational. Mediocristan is where the average is king, where things cluster around the middle, you can aggregate data, and one single data point doesn't really blow up the total.
Like height or weight?
Exactly like human height or weight. If you average the weight of, say, 1,000,000 people, adding the single heaviest person on Earth wouldn't drastically change that average. It just gets absorbed. The book uses the example of shooting the largest land animal, an elephant, versus, say, shooting the largest bank. Adding one elephant's mass to all land animals barely moves the needle. The extremes don't dominate.
Okay, so that's where our standard statistics, the bell curve kind of stuff, works okay.
Mm-hmm.
But extremistan, that sounds different.
Oh, completely different. The Wild West, like you said. Extremistan is where one single observation, one event, can have a massive, totally disproportionate impact on the total. Inequality rules here.
Like wealth.
Wealth is the classic example. Bill Gates walks into a stadium, the average wealth skyrockets, but it tells you nothing about anyone else there. Book sales, website hits, financial markets, these are pure extremistan. One bestseller, one viral video, one market crash can dwarf everything else.
The book's big argument is that we increasingly live in extremistan, or at least the events that matter most come from there.
Yeah.
But our minds, our tools, they're stuck back in mediocristan. We're using the wrong map for the territory.
Precisely. We're applying methods designed for predictable averages to a world driven by unpredictable extremes. It's a fundamental mismatch.
Which brings us right to the book's critique of those tools. It
Yeah,
doesn't pull
that-
any punches, does it? Calling the standard bell curve the great intellectual fraud. Why such strong language?
Because the bell curve, the Gaussian distribution, it's built on the idea that big deviations from the average are super, super rare, almost impossible, practically negligible over the long run.
Which works fine for height, maybe.
Right. For mediocristan stuff, it's okay. But in extremistan, it's worse than useless. It's dangerous. It systematically blinds us to black swans. It gives us this false confidence. It tells us we understand the odds of extreme events when the model itself is basically designed to ignore them.
Wow. So we think we've got a handle on the uncertainty because the model looks neat and tidy, but we're just missing the biggest risks entirely.
Exactly. And this ties into what the book calls Preenicity, or the Platonic fold. It's our deep-seated tendency to fall in love with neat, clean models and categories, to simplify reality.
Like we prefer the map to the actual messy territory.
Precisely. We create these simplified mental maps, these Platonic forms, and they feel comfortable. But reality is messy, complex, full of stuff that doesn't fit our neat boxes. We focus on the visible side of the moon, what our models capture, and ignore the vast dark side, the unknown unknowns.
Is that like the anecdote about the Romans and the statue?
That's a perfect illustration. The Romans trying to put a statue of Yahweh in their temple. Their idea of a god, their Platonic category, required a physical form, something they could see and place. They just couldn't wrap their heads around this abstract, formless god. It didn't compute, didn't fit the model.
So We grab these simplified maps, like using that Pyrenees map when we're actually hiking in the Alps, as the book says. The map looks official, feels comforting, but it's fundamentally wrong. And when a real challenge hits an Alp-sized problem, the map leads us straight into disaster.
Exactly. And it's not just the tools, it's us. Our own minds are kind of rigged against us here. We have these built-in cognitive biases that make us super vulnerable to being fooled by randomness, to missing the black swans swimming right past us.
Okay, let's talk about those. One of the biggest offenders is the narrative fallacy, right? Our absolute need to create stories, to find causes for everything,
Yeah.
especially after it happens.
Oh, it's huge. Our brains are story machines. And this is why unpredictable events always seem so plausible in hindsight. The book mentions conflicts, like in Lebanon, people living through constant surprises still felt they understood the underlying story, even when forecasts were useless.
Yeah.
Or think about after any big election or market crash, immediately you get all these confident analyses explaining exactly why it had to happen that way. We connect the dots backwards and create a smooth narrative.
And that storytelling can be comforting too, can it? It makes things seem less random, maybe even inevitable, takes away some of the feeling that maybe we should have seen it coming or acted differently. That's just bound to happen.
Yeah, it lessens the sting of unpredictability. And that flows right into hindsight bias, or what the book calls retrospective distortion. Looking back, it is so hard to truly remember how uncertain or unlikely something felt at the time.
Like trying to imagine being there at the start of World War II.
Exactly. People living through, say, 1939 couldn't possibly grasp the sheer scale of devastation that was coming. It wasn't obvious then. The example of William Shire's diary is great here. Diaries written in the moment capture that raw uncertainty, that lack of knowledge about the future, in a way that memory just smooths over later.
Our memory basically edits the past to make it make more sense.
It tidies it up. And then there's another huge blind spot: silent evidence.
Ah, yes. The things we don't see.
Crucial. Absolutely crucial and so easy to miss. We only see the winners, the survivors. History gets written by those who made it through. The book talks about someone like Giacomo Casanova, took huge risks, survived, wrote memoirs, makes his life seem maybe less perilous than it was.
Because we don't hear from all the other adventurers who took similar risks and, well, didn't make it.
Precisely. We don't see the failures. We see the wildly successful authors, but we don't see the millions of aspiring writers who never got published. Maybe they're working in coffee shops. The evidence pool is skewed.
So the reality we perceive is distorted. It makes success look more likely, risk look less dangerous than it actually was for everyone who tried.
Definitely. And how risk is framed totally changes how we react to it, often more than the actual numbers. Remember the insurance salesman anecdote, convincing someone they're more likely to die from a mugging in Central Park than a car crash just through vivid storytelling.
Even if the stats say otherwise.
Exactly. And research backs this up. Frame a risk as a tiny 1% chance per year, people might shrug. Frame it as a, say, 25% chance of total loss over 30 years. Same underlying probability, maybe, but the reaction is totally different. The story, the framing, often beats the data for us.
Okay, so with all these mental traps and flawed tools, it starts to make sense why experts, especially in fields like economics or finance, often get predictions so wrong. The book calls this epistemic arrogance.
Right. It's not always that their specific models or procedures are totally broken for some things. The real issue is their confidence in those models. The gap between what they know and what they think they know.
Like the plumber example.
Perfect example. The book says, don't necessarily question the plumber's method. Question his confidence in the error rate of that method. How sure is he that it won't fail unexpectedly? It's the same with forecasts. Doctors give odds on surgery, but how wide is the real uncertainty around that outcome, especially for rare complications, often wider than they convey?
And the track record certainly supports this skepticism. Economic forecasts, financial predictions,
Yeah.
even from Nobel laureates, they miss the big turns, the crises, time and time again.
The examples are stark. That bank with 12 risk managers failing spectacularly. The huge Amaranth Fund blow-up. You can have tons of smart people and complex models, but if they're built on mediocristan assumptions in an extremistan world, they'll miss the black swan that sinks the ship.
Plus, the further out you try to predict, the worse it gets, right?
Mhm.
Forecast degradation.
Hugely. Predictions decay rapidly over time. Look back at forecasts from, say, 1905 trying to predict 1925. Or 1975 trying to predict the year 2000. They're almost comical in hindsight. They missed the wars, the technological shifts, the societal changes. They just project the present forward in a straight line, mostly.
Yeah.
We're terrible at seeing around corners far in the future.
And ironically, so many huge discoveries weren't predicted at all. They were accidents. Serendipity.
Absolutely. Penicillin, cosmic background radiation, pure chance encounters, prepared minds, but not planned foresight.
Right. And people always want actionable advice, positive steps.
Yeah, everyone wants the what to do.
But the book argues, and I think convincingly, that often the most robust advice is negative advice. What not to do.
Like how not to go bust.
Exactly. That's a much more reliable goal than how to get rich quick, especially since most ventures fail. Just avoiding ruin is a powerful strategy in an uncertain world. And yeah, maybe telling people whose profession relies on fundamentally flawed prediction and extremist stand to maybe quit. That's pretty strong negative advice right there. So, okay, if predicting black swans is a fool's errand and our minds and tools are actively misleading us, what's left? How do we actually operate? The book shifts focus then, doesn't it? Away from prediction towards building robustness.
That's the core pivot. Since you can't predict the specific black swan, you prepare for the fact that some unpredictable high-impact event will happen. You focus on being resilient, adaptable, maybe even anti-fragile, able to benefit from shocks.
And one key strategy for this is the barbell. Can you unpack that?
Sure. The barbell strategy is about avoiding the middle ground. Financially, it means putting the vast majority, maybe 80–90% of your assets in extremely safe, boring things, like cash or treasury bills, stuff that won't blow up.
Okay, the safe end of the barbell.
Right. Then you take the small remaining portion, maybe 10–20%, and put it into highly speculative, high-risk, high-potential upside ventures. Small bets that, if they pay off huge positive black swans. Think venture capital, maybe some options trading, things where your loss is capped but your potential gain is massive.
And the crucial thing is avoiding that mushy middle, like moderate risk corporate bonds or complex hedge funds.
Exactly. Avoid the stuff where you think you have moderate risk but could actually get wiped out by an unexpected event, negative black swan, and where your upside is limited anyway. The barbell exposes you to positive surprises while protecting you from negative ones.
And this isn't just for money, right? The book applies it more broadly.
Totally. You can apply it to your lifestyle. Think about health, maybe long periods of very low-intensity activity, like walking, combined with very short, intense, random bursts of effort, like sprints, instead of chronic moderate jogging.
Okay.
Or eating patterns, periods of normal eating followed by periods of fasting. It's about introducing controlled, acute stressors rather than constant low-level grinding stress. The book mentions Art Devaney's ideas here. It builds resilience, trades duration for intensity.
Interesting. So another related idea is about optimization versus redundancy.
Yeah, this is key. Mother Nature, the book argues, doesn't optimize. She builds in redundancy, slack, backup systems. You have 2 kidneys, 2 lungs. Forests have biodiversity. Optimization, especially the kind corporations and governments love, strips out all that slack to maximize efficiency for the known risks.
Making systems super efficient, but also super fragile.
Exactly. When an unknown shock hits, there's no buffer. Highly optimized systems break easily. Think about just-in-time supply chains during a pandemic, or huge interconnected banks deemed too big to fail. Or even governments trying to smooth out every little dip in the business cycle. The book suggests this might prevent small, healthy corrections and make the eventual big crash even worse.
So don't aim for perfect efficiency based on the past. Aim for resilience to handle the future surprises. Build in some buffers.
Right, and sometimes that means relying less on complex models and more on practical wisdom, what the book calls frenetic rules.
Like heuristics, rules of thumb.
Basically, yeah. Practical rules derived from experience for dealing with messy, complex situations where the fancy models just don't work or are actively misleading. It's knowing when to ditch the map of the Pyrenees because you're clearly in the Alps, and relying on basic navigation skills or local knowledge instead. Don't force reality into a model that doesn't fit it. Don't use the wrong map just because it's the only one you brought.
And underpinning all of this, there's a kind of mindset, isn't there? Amor fati.
Amor fati, yeah. Love of fate, It's a Stoic idea, picked up by Nietzsche. It's not just passively accepting whatever happens, it's deeper. It's about learning to embrace your fate, the good and the bad, dealing with loss, uncertainty, adversity, and finding ways not just to survive, but maybe even to benefit from it.
It's a mental posture for living with radical uncertainty.
Exactly. You can't control the external events, the black swans, but you can control your response. Shrugging off setbacks, learning from them, focusing on what you can influence. It builds immense psychological resilience.
And these dynamics, these extremists and forces, they don't just operate in finance or personal life. They shape society itself, right? Like the Matthew effect.
Oh, absolutely. The Matthew effect: to those who have, more shall be given. Preferential attachment. It means early advantages, sometimes purely down to luck, tend to snowball.
Like getting cited early in academia.
That's the example used. Get cited once or twice. You become more visible, get cited more, regardless of whether your initial work was truly that much better than someone else's who didn't get that lucky break. Success breeds success, often disproportionately. Luck plays a much bigger role than our narratives usually admit.
And this leads to those winner-take-all markets in certain fields.
Right. Unlike mediocristan professions, plumbers, dentists where income is more tied to hours worked or individual skill level, in extremistan fields like writing, music, acting, a tiny number of superstars capture almost all the rewards.
Though the internet cuts both ways there.
Yeah, the book touches on that. The internet can amplify the superstar effect, global reach. But it can also break down old gatekeepers, allowing niche creators or niche ideas to find an audience that wouldn't have been possible before. Think online communities, specialized blogs.
And sometimes society develops mechanisms, maybe unconsciously, to push back against extreme concentration.
Well, the book mentions things like monogamy rules historically, spreading reproductive opportunities more evenly than pure alpha dominance might, or progressive taxation aiming to moderate extreme wealth concentration, though the reasons are complex and debated.
But the point is, these extremistan dynamics are woven into the fabric of society.
They really are, though the book also cautions against focusing only on economic inequality. Extremistan manifests in many ways.
So pulling this all together, what's the big takeaway for you listening right now?
I think the core message is really stark and really important. Black swans, these big, unpredictable, impactful events, they aren't just weird exceptions. They are the main drivers of history, of markets, of our lives.
And our standard ways of thinking, our tools, our biases, they actively hide this reality from us. We're mostly blind to what matters most. Trying to predict these things is basically pointless.
Right. The real value isn't just in accumulating knowledge, but in deeply appreciating the limits of your knowledge. Recognizing what you don't know, like Umberto Eco's Anti-Library, all those unread books constantly reminding him of the vastness of the unknown.
Yeah.
And look, these ideas aren't just abstract philosophy. They have real practical implications for your decisions, how you manage your money, what kind of career risks you take, how you interpret the news, how you just, get through the day in a world that's fundamentally uncertain and prone to massive surprises.
So if we accept that history is driven by the unpredictable and that our minds and our methods are largely blind to it, maybe the final question for you to think about is this. What specific steps can you take starting today to build a life or a plan or a business that's robust enough to withstand, maybe even benefit from a future that you absolutely know you cannot predict?